$18. Mike, is there anything you want to point out on the financial report?
Chairman, just a few items. The past due rent summaries increased slightly from last month. I'm going to start working that down. I've got the Deacon and Gutkin accounts pretty much caught up and settled by now. I will touch base on my manager's report on the Vesquez compound. I'm hoping to have that go into legal here soon. The other couple, the Hangar 1 tenant, that plane is booted, so it's obviously not going anywhere until we get a few more payments. We've received one of $500 from that tenant. Hoping to get a few more there. So need to look at possibly writing off some of the older stuff and moving a couple, maybe two of those line items down into the pending legal action settlement plan. So I'll look at that and report back for next month. From an overall standpoint, the next 2 months is really where we start catching up. A lot of our expenses, our bond payment and insurance come out at the beginning of the year. So our expenditures always show a little bit higher than our revenues. The next month or two is really where they start catching up and matching each other. We do have a couple larger expenses coming up, so that'll probably affect it as well.
Fans.
Mike, obviously our past due is plus 60, but I'm going to guess we're probably at 180 to 210 for most of those.
The Tomasic and the TSC, the Tomasic, and the Vesquez, and the Russman. The Deacon, Gutkin, and Papke are less.
So they're at 60 to 90 days.
Yeah, they're within 60 to 90. The Papke account was caught up. That's the plane that we have on tie down that's been out there for a very long time. We rebooted that as well. The boot seems to be a pretty useful method for the local planes here. I mean, obviously the plane's not moving until we get payment, so it's a pretty effective method.
Yeah, it's concerning that it's continuing to grow. And, once they get over 180 to 210, forget it.
Yep.
So, what did we carry over from last year, from last fiscal year to this year? Was there a...
the Russman account was really the only one. Obviously the pending legal, but the Russman one was really...
So everything else is new. Hey. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Excuse me, on the financial report? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to receive and file. Motion by Mr. Mann, supported by Mr. Filarski to receive and file the financial report for July 2018. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. Item number 6 is the manager's report. 6A is the MDOT Joint Seal Repair Project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any documentation for this, but I wanted to just loop back to the commission and report. Earlier in the year when I met with MDOT Aeronautics, they allocated up to an additional $50,000 for emergency repairs to our runways as similar years. They've noted that this will likely be one of the last years they're willing to do that. That's still to be determined. For whatever reason this year, the runway's overall condition, 1735, has continued to deteriorate, but we haven't had any major blow-ups that are requiring repair. We do have one small area on our taxiway here, Alpha, that runs east to west that will need to be cut out and replaced. And that comes on the recommendation of the MDOT inspector. I would estimate that to be probably somewhere around $10,000 or $12,000 max. Once that's done, I had asked MDOT if we could use the remaining funds for something like preventative maintenance crack sealing. They at the time indicated that would be an option for us. That's something I've been arguing with the state about for the last 3 or 4 years. They run a lot of grant programs that are great discounts and beneficial for the airport for crack sealing, but they only do it for asphalt. Well, we have a very old Navy ramp that's in great condition, but all the joints are deteriorated. They need to be resealed. They're growing weeds out of them. So I'm hoping to be able to tap into that. I'm going to follow up with them on that. Our share of that project of the $50,000 would be 10%. So $5,000 to do, $50,000 of joint sealing is a great deal for us. I intend to move forward with that and make sure that's still an option for us. They normally have preferred vendors for that right through the state, so I'm hoping to be able just to tap into that. $50,000 doesn't get you too far on crack and joint sealing, but I would think it would get us a majority of the ramp space right out here where our planes are parking at. And we'll look at also doing maybe some stuff on the taxiways if we have areas that are really bad. So just want to let you know that will be coming down the pipeline, hopefully in the fall.
So you're expecting to get it done this year still?
I'm hoping to, yep.
Any questions for Mike on item 6A? 6B is the Commerce Park Storage Yard Cleanup.
Mr. Chair, in your packets is included an invoice that we are going to pay for Pro Excavating. The work has been complete. I submitted this for into billing to get paid. That's the $6,000 is the cost of the final cleanup that the tenant did not complete in that boat storage yard. So there was a pile of debris left over, as well as their operations in the yard left a lot of debris on the top of the soil and sediment in there. So we had a lot of loose screws and things like that. Pro hauled off in trucks all of the debris that was left behind, and then the blade didn't scrape the yard. So I've asked our township attorney twice to go after it. I'm waiting to hear back from him. Obviously, you can see on our past due summary, it's about $3,000 past due plus this bill. I'm hoping to get that in the hopper quickly and get it into court. That dollar amount's high enough that it needs to be looked at.
That's TSC Construction.
No, that is the Vasquez Boatyard. TSC Construction was the cell tower company in Building 6162.
Are they Cozile resident, you know, the owners?
The owner also owns the boat livery on East River Road that's currently for sale. Now, the unauthorized sublease, Vasquez, the unauthorized sublease to the subleasee that made the damages was not approved by us. So, I mean, the attorney needs to look at whether both parties are at fault or if it's just the main leasee that's probably who's going to get the bill. But I need to get him to get engaged on recouping the funds. So
Our agreement is with the leasee,
Correct.
not anybody that he subletted to, especially since we didn't approve that.
correct. So the good news is that the yard is ready to be leased out again, and we have on our agenda tonight a lease for a potential tenant. I think that would be a better fit for the yard overall, and they're willing to do some improvements to it.
Can you give us an update on this next month to Mike, where things stand?
Sure.
Ben Oz.
I'd like to make a recommendation that we have the township attorney proceed on collection and possible litigation to recover the funds for both the cleanup and the past due rent from Vasquez. Mike's having some trouble getting him to move. We'll just make it as a, excuse me, as a commission action and get him to move forward on this thing and just start on it, get going on it, so we don't get the runaround from anybody. We're now requesting action. That would be my suggestion. I'll make that motion.
Or,
Or by Mr. Manns. Mr. Manns, you had a question?
oh, I was just curious, Mike, how long was he a tenant?
I believe he was there for, well, the father was in the lot for 2 years, passed away. The son took the lot over. It was about a year after that the subtenant started some operations in there without authorization. So, about 4 to 5 years total.
How did they get a sub in there that we didn't know about?
It was a similar use, right? There was all boat storage, but then they started scrapping boats in the yard, and that's when we started noticing there was a large buildup of boat storage that went. The uncleanliness of the yard probably should have been noticed a little sooner than it was, but they didn't start really crushing it until there was a bigger issue, right? I just, from my perspective, the only thing I truly didn't understand is the subtenant. I mean, he was 90% of the way cleaned up and just stopped. Why go that far the distance and not complete the task and end up in court? It did not make sense to me. It still doesn't, but I mean, they did a majority of the work to clean up that yard and just didn't do the last 10%. So
I think it should be noted that his property here on the island is for sale. And once that property is sold, we're going to have very little leverage
correct.
on anything than that because he won't be here. He'll be gone.
Yep.
So
And
that's just a suggestion that the sooner we get Mr. Assorti moving on that, I think the better off we'll be. And at least we've got some answers when the auditor comes and says, what's going on there? It's substantial enough with this bill from Pro Excavating that it's certainly worth going after.
Okay, we've got a motion by Ms. Van Allen, supported by Mr. Mans. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Next item is item number 6C, which is the FAA grant application. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe I sent this to the commission in an email. Just wanted to follow up with it and give it to you again. The FAA, there have been rumors for the last year about potential release of funding. They have announced, again, that they are going to release $1 billion in funding for projects across the country on airports. They have a preferred rural airport list, as well as the primary airports being something like Traverse City, Detroit Metro, Willow Run. So there's a blended allocation there. They do have, like I said, preferred rural list. Unfortunately, we are not on that list. That does not mean we cannot apply and we can still be considered. So I'm going to start. The one thing that's interesting with the grant, and I've asked our engineer to look into it. They already have a form for me to submit, and they have guidelines that are clarifying what kind of projects they're interested in. It seems to be focused more on generating revenue. So this is definitely something the Airport Advisory Committee we need to get together on and kind of prioritize our project list. I think runway 1735 is definitely of very high interest to us, but I think we also need to discuss if it's supposed to be revenue, long-term sustaining the airport, revenue-based. Do we want to look at something like hangar projects or anything like that? I don't think we want to throw all of our hopes and dreams into the pot here. I think we would need to be focused on 2 or 3 different projects and put those in for submittal. So the deadline's a little ways out. We have some time to consider that. Like I said, I'll be getting together hopefully with the Airport Advisory Committee and doing some brainstorming and get back to the commission and see if the direction's the same.
Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 6D, which is the Building 63 storage income comparison. And everybody should have in their packet a chart that Mike put together.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a request from a few commissioners to do a breakdown of our Building 63 storage operation. They wanted to see a breakdown of what the previous revenue had been with the other tenant, Dave's Hot Rod Garage, versus our new tenant, Outer Limit Customs. And again, this is a management agreement. So we own the property and the facility. They are managing a storage operation inside there for us. I broke out the Outer Limits just into the 2 kind of seasons. They have more of a summer and winter. So, you can see they're all in. It's about $31,000, $32,000, which is about equivalent to when we started in 2012 with the previous tenant. So, I think there were a couple of factors that are a little reduced. You can see when the previous tenant gave up, ceased operations, they were on track to do about a $50,000 a year. So, that's $18,000 less than the previous tenant at their peak. I think the 2 factors with that is just the changeover itself, and then I think the current tenant probably underestimated the amount of marketing they needed to do a little bit. They've expressed interest in continuing on. I think their agreement has another few months on it, so we'll be back in front of the commission in the next month or 2 probably to renew that.
Any questions for Mike? So their agreement ends what month, Mike?
I'd have to look at that. I believe it's just before the winter season starts. I think it's November, I want to say. I'll double check that.
So they'll have almost a year in 2018 at that time. So obviously, if you could give us the summary at that point, that would help do a more complete comparison between the 2. Is your expectations that they're going to ramp up to meet the other revenue?
I believe so. I think they can ramp up year over year. I think it's going to take another year or 2. My recommendation would be to continue on. I'm not unhappy with the management agreement there. I have heard, and I don't have documentation of this, but according to the current tenant, the previous tenant was working against them a little bit. I think that could be a factor there in the background as well. I mean, obviously, the previous tenant's going to have some preferred clients that are going to move or leave when he vacates. So I think there's a little bit of a changeover year there. But I think it will pick up and level out. Like I said, I think the current tenant underestimated the amount of marketing and advertising he needed to put out, and he's willing to step that up or express that he's willing to. So, I mean, I'd be willing to go along at least another year and seeing if that can come true.
Anything else for Mike on this item? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 7, which is our action items. 7A is the Island Roots LLC yard lease. And we have a resolution before us that reads, based upon the recommendation from the Groseal Airport Commerce Park Manager, the Groseal Airport Commerce Park Commission hereby approves a lease between Island Roots LLC and the Groseal Municipal Airport. A formal lease will be developed pending approval by the Commission. Terms of the proposed lease agreement are listed in the history, purpose, and explanation section of this resolution. Motion by Mr. Manns, support by Mr. Filarski. Under discussion, Mike, so reading through the items, they want to use 25% of this property for boat storage, correct?
Private vehicle storage, whether that be a boat, an RV, a car, I think that's simply just to offset some of the costs for the yard for the company. The primary focus will be, obviously, landscaping.
And, I have some concerns, that we end up right in the same spot that we did with the tenant that were just paid $6,000 to clean up. And the only reason they're doing that is to get some income based on the cost of that. And is there any reason why we shouldn't share in part of that income? I mean, he could, I don't know what he rents space for, but he could actually make more money renting that space than he's paying us to rent the space, correct?
Sure. I believe between the partial income of renting out a few facilities and probably selling material off there, he'll definitely recoup the money on the yard. I think that's the goal of the tenant. But yeah, it's that 25% is definitely just to offset some of the rental cost. I don't know if he could recoup the full $645 a month on 25% of that yard. I'd have to look at the space and see what our other tenants are charging. But
do you have any idea of how much area 25% makes up there?
the entire yard is 48,000 square feet, so if you call it 50,000, about 5,000 square foot. No, I'm sorry, that'd be 10%. I'm sorry, that'd be 10%. Yeah, 12,500. Thank you.
I have some concerns that it's going to end up, or it could end up being another headache for us. But
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Manns.
one of the things, the bullet points there, I'm not terribly excited about covered storage. I mean, I think you'd really have to have some verbiage as noted that, you know, it'd have to, if it got approved, you know, taken down if we deemed it. Yep, you have all that, but that gets a little tricky.
Just a note, I mean, the tenant to the west has got a temporary trailer in that yard and some other storage things that are kept in the back.
I'd rather have a nice storage, three-sided
Right.
trailer, but
Right.
I just think we just have to watch that.
Mike, I think we need to see a site plan with a little more detail. Like, for instance, as Mr. Mann just talked about the, what this storage structure, what it's going to be made of, how big is it, what kind of material, I just think we need more detail.
Did I have to go through planning? I'm just,
I don't know.
I don't know. Well, obviously, if it does, I would just, that wouldn't happen. But
So you'll bring more detail back to us.
I can request that the potential tenant put together more of a site plan. And, when we lease the yard to the west there, Doug Henry's facility, we had a small site plan to clean up the frontage that he proposed to us and things like that. That tenant, who is a long-standing tenant, the only request they had of me when leasing that yard out, they requested a better divider, a more privacy divider between the two yards. There's currently a chain link fence. I didn't make any promises on that. I said I'd have a discussion with the tenant. The tenant said the potential tenant said he would probably put something up, but wouldn't guarantee it. I don't know if we want to put a stipulation on that. I mean, it's between the yards, so from my perspective, I'm not too concerned with that. I'm more concerned about the roadside frontage from Grow and the fence on the north side between our residential unit, our residential housing back there. I'd like to see a nice green buffer between the two. The one and previous tenants, the other issue we've had on that yard is in the wintertime, that green buffer that we have between the two, the foliage gets thin in the wintertime, and they don't enjoy the sights and the sounds. So, that was where he was talking about building up a berm on the north side, but that's in that as well. So yeah, we can definitely request a site plan and have them put something together and bring it back to the commission. I can do that.
Any other questions, comments?
I'm wondering if this is already on a table on the floor for a vote. I'm not comfortable with it as you're not. It's just not complete enough, and they're asking for a lot of stuff here. I'm just wondering if perhaps we could bring the tenant in here at our next meeting and talk this thing over either before the meeting or after the meeting, because I see a lot of problems with this, the way he's got it structured here. And for very few dollars. I mean, we're sticking our neck out there a long ways for a $600. That's a pretty valuable piece of property. And I'm just not sure. Plus, we're now creating the potential of creating competition for a couple of our current tenants. I'm not sure it's the way to go. I'm not comfortable with it.
Mr. Mann's made the motion. If he wants to withdraw, and Mr. Filarski
That's up to him, but
withdraw that, and then we could table it. We can do that.
I don't have a problem withdrawing it. I think we probably owe it to them to meet or before our next meeting, if we have to meet one morning or afternoon or something on even a conference call.
Yep, just to keep it moving along.
A little bit more fair to him.
Yeah.
Waiting another month, but I have no problem.
I would say I think the potential tenant's hoping to get in before winter so we can do some work on the yard. Rich Brower.
possibly do it in a study session, half hour before the meeting? I mean, can you guys make that? Is that comfortable for you to get here? And that way you can have it on the agenda, which we can or cannot. We can remove it if we don't get satisfactory answers. I just would like to hear some more about these plans. This is a pretty superstructured plan for a property they're only going to pay $600 a month for.
I mean, if he was to install a structure and then he walks away
Right.
and leaves that structure up and we don't want it there, it's going to cost us money to.
Another $6,000.
Understood. Yep, and if you recall, just as a reminder to the commission, I mean, the tenant currently is in Building 6162 on a temporary basis. When TSC moved out, that subtenant was in there. We continued to rent them a very small portion of the building unheated. So that's the goal of shifting him down to that spot on Grow Road was to get him out of Building 6162. But, I mean, he's in a covered facility already on our property, so I don't think it's a big deal to request a site plan and continue moving forward. We had multiple interested parties in this. I discussed with, I think, 3 different parties, and I just felt he was the best suited for the yard. We had somebody like Pro Excavating that was looking at that, but based on past experiences with Compo, hauling concrete, broken concrete, dumping early in the morning, it's not good with the residents nearby. Try to find a kind of a quiet fit for that yard, and it's not easy to do. Landscaping, proven to the west with Mr. Henry, has definitely been shown to be a good fit for the facility. So, but I understand. I think that we do need to see a site plan, and we can go back to the individual with that. And I'll invite him to the next meeting.
Okay, so Mr. Mans and Mr. Filarski withdrew their motion to approve, and Mr. Mans' motion to table.
Motion.
Got a motion by Mr. Mann, supported by Mr. Filarski to table this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. No, we don't table stuff here very often.
No,
Next item on the agenda is item number 7B, which is Worldwise Inc. office lease. We have a resolution before us that states, based upon the recommendation from the Groseal Airport Commerce Park manager, the Groseal Airport Commerce Park Commission hereby approves a lease renewal between Worldwise Inc. and the Groseal Municipal Airport. A formal lease will be developed pending approval by the Commission. Terms of the proposed lease agreement are listed in the history, purpose, explanation section of the resolution. Motion by Mr. Van Haas. Support by Mr. Mans. Mike, we're talking about a one-year lease, correct?
Correct, yep.
For $13 a square foot. Anything you can tell us about the user?
The individual is moving onto the island from a nearby city. They're actually building one of the new houses going up on West River Road, and he is the director of sales for Worldwise, which is one of the larger cat and dog pet toy manufacturers. Like I said, he's the director of sales, so I think he has several children, is looking to get out of his house and have an office with some quiet space, and that fits the bill.
Questions for Mike on the proposed lease? Hearing none. We have a motion and support. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. Item number 7 is bid award recommendation for Building 75 roof replacement. Mike, I don't have the resolution.
Yep. I'm sorry. You want a copy of it?
I got A, B, and D. I got Mike.
I missed one.
Chris's. We have a resolution before us that reads, based upon the recommendation of the Airfield Commerce Park Manager, the Groseal Airport Commerce Park Commission hereby awards the removal and replacement of the stone ballast roof of Building 75 in the Commerce Park contract to Holbrook Roofing Company, Inc., at a project cost not to exceed $63,638 plus a 10% contingency of $6,363. Motion by Mr. Van Haas. Supported by Mr. Mans.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I also forgot to include in that resolution that this is awards and recommends to the Township Board to award. We can't award that size of a contract. We have to go to the Township Board. So I apologize about that. Just say hereby recommends the Commission award, or the Township Board award the removal and replacement project. So
You're okay with that, Mr. Van Haas? That change in Mr. Mans?
Yes.
And it'll be the same thing for action item D as well. I apologize about that.
Any questions, comments? Hearing none, we got a motion by Mr. Van Haas, supported by Mr. Mans. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Item number 7D is to bid award recommendations for the fuel farm retention wall repair. We have a resolution before us that reads, based upon the recommendation from the Airfield Commerce Park Manager, the Groseal Airport Commerce Park Commission hereby awards the repair of the fuel farm containment walls contract to Serco, Inc. at a project cost not to exceed $15,898 plus a 10% contingency of $1,589.
So moved.
Support by Mr. Filarski. Any comments, Mike?
Note both the projects are budgeted items. We've gone through the bidding process following the township guidelines. We received 2 bids back on the roof. On the roofing project, we only received 1 bid back on the fuel farm containment wall. I'm comfortable with it. The engineers reviewed both projects and is comfortable with the specs and design and the contractors that we're recommending here. So the fuel farm repair wall is it seems like a specialty kind of a project. There aren't too many contractors that do the gunite and cutting the curbs like that around the fuel farms in the area. So I'm comfortable with both projects moving forward.
This resolution should read that we're recommending to the
Township Board, correct.
Any other comments or questions? Mans.
When would you want to start the work on the roof?
The roof I would like to get started as soon as possible. We've had 3 small leaks develop into it. The contractor that we're awarding the bid to has been great on getting out to me same day on patching those and trying to nurse it until we get the rubber stamp from the township board. The fuel farm, I think that gunite kind of concrete, talking to the contractor, is a little better done in the fall. We'll probably wait on that for a little bit cooler weather, maybe another month or so.
When is the board meeting that you would go to?
The next meeting is next Monday, I believe.
September 10th, I think.
September 10th? I'm sorry, it's a little further out. September 10th. I think if we have a larger issue with the roof, we'll look at just doing it as emergency repair. I mean, we've already followed the procedures, so that would be, a decent application of that. If we're going to have a several $1,000 repair develops, we're obviously just going to move forward with redoing the roof and a temporary patch. But we're hoping to get it in front of the board as soon as possible on the 10th then.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. Van Oz, supported by Mr. Filarski. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Item number 8 is our subcommittee reports. Have none tonight. Item number 9 is discussion items. Anyone have any discussion items? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 10, which is the chairman's report. I have nothing to report tonight, so we'll move on to item number 11, which is our public comment. Anyone in the public like to address the commission?
Good.
You'd like to state your name for the record?
My name is Bill Heil. I live on East River Road. It's a simple question. Building 61, have we successfully rented that at any kind of a reasonable rate?
In what duration? In the last 5 years, we've had a tenant in there that occupied the entire facility. In the last 2 to 3, we've had a tenant in there that occupied approximately 40% of the facility. In the last year, it's been vacant.
So we've had mixed results for the past few years.
Absolutely.
Is it in rentable condition now? I mean, is there heat in it? I know you were renting it unheated.
Yep.
All the systems
Available. The utilities to that facility are very expensive to run, so we normally mothball it in the wintertime. We winterize the suppression system. If we don't have a tenant in it, we turn off the electrical. The furnaces are all very functional in there. They're older box-style furnaces, and then the facility has 483-phase power to it. So just to have that power on, just to have the transformer turned on is over $1,000 a month idle. So obviously we try to turn that. We have a smaller transformer that's available for the west side of the building, but it's in rentable condition. It just would need to be brought up to speed, but that's something that we're waiting for the right tenant.
I had heard that somewhere along the line there had been some damage from some source. I don't know how it worked, but the plumbing and the sprinkler systems had failed.
No issues with that. We did have a small electrical fire 2 years ago now on the roof and a junction box, and that came from previous tenant Iverson Industries installing improper conduits on the roof. We had an insurance claim to take care of that. We haven't done the rebuild on that. It could be done fairly quickly, and the reason we haven't done that yet is A, we don't have a tenant, B, we don't know what the new tenant's demands would be. So we're kind of waiting to do that until we know what the new demands are.
Do you have a plan for marketing the building to get it occupied?
I mean, I think the commission's, we don't have an active plan, but I mean, we've tried several different methods with brokers and.
Just a comment on that. Until such time as we get some, we've lost tenants on both of those big buildings due to the bridge condition, the bridge restrictions, and I don't anticipate personally, it's a personal opinion, that we're going to be able to rent that facility for any manufacturing because of the bridge. I mean, nobody's going to come in here and rent a facility when they can't get their trucks on and off the island. So until that issue is resolved, that building will probably remain idle. I don't see it being rented as a manufacturing facility. That's my opinion. And until we can get some positive action with completion of that bridge, we're stuck. And it is what it is.
It's probably more likely that it's going to be rented, if at all, to smaller tenants that
Sure.
don't need.
But that's a big commitment. Because if we do that, then we are committed to that. If we start subdividing that building, that has to be our plan to do that, because once you start, it's pretty hard to go back and rent it to somebody that needs a big facility.
I haven't given this particular issue a lot of, in-depth thought. This came to my mind, and I decided to show up. But it seems to me that we've been using a lot of these buildings for storage. And of course, when you're talking about places where there's a lot of employees, you can always worry about the railroad tracks and the bridge and all of that causing difficulties. But when you get to storage, there's certain types that are not frequently, in and out, or if they are, it doesn't matter whether they're held up by a train that much. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking, say you had a furniture place like Art Van that had a need to store some more furniture, or Bell Tire, some tires, or there's I don't remember the name of it, but there's a moving and storage company on Fort Street. I mean, in those kinds of situations, all of them I can conceive of as using a large space. And I've just thought of this. I mean, I'm not claiming to be an expert on this. But something like that, or other, some people need to store records in perpetuity. Places like that would be able to probably, in most cases, go over the bridge on West Road. The only thing we'd have to worry about is a railroad train in that case. And we could rent it at some attractive rate and supply the appropriate amount of electricity. Those examples I've used aren't going to be big electric demands. It was just a thought, and I appreciate the answer.
Well, if you have any other suggestions or want to talk to Mike, feel free to stop in, and we're always looking for, ways that we might be able to run it. So if you have any other ideas, please let Mike know. And thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment, Carl? No? Seeing none, next item on the agenda is to adjourn.
Moved.
Motion by Mr. Van Oz, supported by Mr. Mans to adjourn at 7:40. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries.